Hi everyone, I've got another tool review today. This is a specialized tool that not too many people will probably need, but if you do have your own property that's maybe a larger property, or if you work on a natural area of significance somewhere, then you may want to look at a tool like this. This is called an Extractigator. And this is a heavy-duty tool that's basically used to help control invasive plants, particularly shrubs and trees. And I'll show you how that's used in a second, but I'll just say that this is made in Canada, in British Columbia, and I'll put the link down below as to where you could purchase it if you have an interest in it. But right now I'll just get to showing you how to use it. So as I mentioned before, this tool is used to basically help control invasive shrubs and trees that may be on your land. So if you're a larger landowner, or if you work for a natural area like a park or something and you want to help control some invasive shrubs and trees, this tool can help you do that. Basically what it is a strong metal handle attached to a foot here, and then there's a clamp that opens up when you lift it up. This clamp opens, and then when you rest it, you can see by moving the handle back and forth, that'll close the clamp. So here it's closing on my finger. This one has also had this large metal orange plate attached to the bottom. They don't come like this originally, but you can get this as an add-on. This is called the Bigfoot, and what this does is it broadens the weight distribution of the instrument for especially on use on soft sand like we have here, or other non-compacted soils, just to help give you more pressure to pull the shrub or the tree out. Now, as I mentioned, this is usually used for non-native shrubs and trees, things like European buckthorn, lilacs, and there's other invasive shrubs depending where you may live that you may want to extract out of the soil to clear an area. Here I predominantly use it, we're just borrowing it from a friend, but what I would predominantly use it for here is taking out some of these young balsam poplar saplings. In an area here, like a regenerating sand pit, these balsam poplars come in fairly quickly, and they're very dense, and they can take over an area very quickly. And in this area right here particularly, I'm trying to keep it fairly open and to almost create a bit of a grassland, so I'm not wanting these trees to take over completely. So I'm just going to extract this out. Now you can also cut these off, and I've done that a lot. Cutting is obviously a lot simpler and quicker. The only problem with cutting is these plants tend to resprout very quickly. So if I was cutting this in the summer or the spring, or even now, next spring and summer, there'll be new shoots. It'll send up about 5 more new stems. So that keeps going on. It suckers. They sucker after they're cut. And many shrubs and trees do that. If you cut them, they just sucker up numerous stems, which almost can be worse. So I'm going to show you now how this works to extract the stem. Okay, so basically you just move the unit up beside the tree, making sure the jaws are open. Then you put the jaws around the tree trunk, and it clamps on, and then you just push down. Now the neat thing about this design is that apparently it applies about 10 times the force of what you're applying. So if you're putting 10 pounds of pressure down, it's pulling on it with 100 pounds of force. Now, one of the things that's quite hard with these balsam poplars is they have long running roots that go all through the sand. So whereas you can sometimes pull them up if they're small, once they get to this point, they're very difficult to pull up. They have strong, long roots that run all through the sand, and you'll see this even with this machine. It takes a while. Now that one came out pretty good, but you can see the root here is fairly long. Here's this particular root on this tree. It's fairly long, but we do have some here that sometimes reach 3 meters or more in length. And you just have to sort of keep pulling them and pulling them. But I think the main thing is if you get most of the root and you're not leaving the crown of the root, that eliminates the potential for it to sucker again and resprout with numerous trunks. Anyhow, I'll show another scenario with this one beside it. This is already a 2-trunk seedling here, probably attached together. Now that one sort of broke off, but still got a bit of a side root. And what you can do is you just you bring up after the first pull, you pull on the trunk and get lower on the thing. See, that broke off again, but you can probably still pull up on this root here. Yeah, there we go. Once you get enough out, then you can try pulling it by hand. Okay, that's got most of it anyhow, so I don't think that tree will be coming back too easy. Here's another example of the balsam poplar coming out with the Extractigator. You will get breakage sometimes, and that's not too big of a deal. Now see, the main root here is coming out, and I can pull it out quite well with my hands here, but when you get to a hard spot, this thing can give you a lot more force to pull with. Anyhow, there you go. Still spreading, but often you will get shrubs and trees, small trees, where their roots are growing in gravelly or rocky soil as well, which makes it very difficult to pull. And this would make the process much easier because of the additional mechanical advantage you get with this long lever action. So here's another example of a shrub that I might use this for, or that I will use this for. It's a native shrub, but it tends to expand in a colony fashion through root growth all through the ground. It's called prickly ash, and I don't have a real problem with it per se. It's very valuable for wildlife habitat, but as I said, it spreads fairly quickly through an area and can encroach on trail sides like it is here, and it's very thorny, so it obviously catches onto your skin and cuts you and cuts your clothing. So here I'm just going to use it to clear off some of the prickly ash from the sides of our trails. Just show you how it works with that. Should have brought some gloves out for this tree. I'm just going to put it on the lower part. Anyhow, that gives you an idea of the root system on prickly ash. Quite extensive, and I believe these can sprout new stems from the end of the roots. So, like the balsam poplar, if you were to just cut it off here, which I do a lot of too, it tends to re-sprout very quickly. So you're only removing the problem for a while, whereas if you do it this way, you get rid of it for quite a long time. I'll just show another one here. You can see I only have to push down pretty lightly with this to get it to come out of the ground. Now these are sandy soils. If you have a rocky soil, it's going to be a bit more difficult, but it'll still pull it out. So in summary, if you have an area that you're trying to extract relatively small numbers of invasive trees or shrubs out of, or if you have more time to spend and you might still have a pretty big area with lots of them, you can see it's actually a fairly quick process. The nice thing about it is you're not having to use gas or start engines or anything. You're not using toxic sprays on the plants. Now, some land managers will, if they have a big area to clear, they'll come in and cut off the stems of whatever it is, things like buckthorn, and then they'll just apply a spray or a herbicide like Roundup on top of the cut off stems, and that goes down and kills the tree roots and everything. And that's probably an approach you would use if you had a big area of much larger, more mature shrubs and trees. But this works great if you have smaller areas of younger trees. Now, these prickly ash don't get that big anyhow, but they do get bigger than this, but they tend to be a fairly small shrub. The poplar that we have here, the balsam poplar, this works well as long as they're in the 1 to 2 centimeter range. If they get much bigger than that, then it would be getting difficult to rip them out of the ground. But as long as the trees and seedlings are fairly small still, this works great. And I think you'd find it a useful tool if you have an area that you want to keep clean of invasive trees and shrubs, or like in the cases I've shown here, you may have native trees, but they're just in an area where you want to keep a different habitat under control, or if you just want to clear the edges of trails and things like that. This is called the Extractigator. Okay, here I'm going to try and take out a larger prickly ash. This one's got a base at the bottom of about 1.5 inches wide, or 3 centimeters or so. So we'll see if it can have any luck at pulling this. Have such a massive roots on them. See here. So that one came out. These have massive, numerous roots. So I was trying to get the bottom part around the roots initially, and I couldn't do that, so I found I was pulling it out fairly easily in this sandy soil, so that worked fairly well. It's not the be-all end-all by any means. That one took a fair amount of pressure to pull it out, but again, if you're trying to cause minimal disturbance to the area that you're working in, this works well. Now, I did create what looked like a bit of a hole there, but that's just pulling out the main root mass, which you can see on this is very dense, so it holds a lot of soil. As I said, you can cut these off, but in a short while they'll be suckering up with more stems, so you'll cut one stem and you might get 4 or 5 other stems replacing it, so that's often a bit of a frustrating thing. Now, if you came back and kept cutting them like every couple months or something, then you would eventually get rid of them, but you'd have to be there constantly doing that. Whereas once you get them out with this, that pretty well gets rid of that particular plant for good. Some of these, as I mentioned, are tied together through their roots, so you may have to pull a few of them out to get certain ones out, or you may find when you pull one out it actually takes another one out as well. It just depends where you're working and what the situation is. Just thought I'd mention that tool in case anyone's interested in doing that kind of work.